Hi, everyone. My name is Renee Long, a communications specialist and webinar coordinator here at the American College of Healthcare Sciences. And joining me today for all our technical needs is also Dominic Aiello, a social media specialist and webinar coordinator here at ACHS. And today we'll be hosting a very special discussion webinar with an ACHS student, Tina Elliott, entitled Off the Grid for Holistic Health. Tina was featured a featured personality, on TLC's program Risking It All. On the show, Tina led her family, the Elliots, nearly 2,000 miles away from their home in Kansas to live off the grid in Oregon for a more natural, healthful life. We're very excited to hear Tina's story today. But before we get started, I need to go over a few housekeeping items. You may have noticed that your line has been muted. We are recording today's webinar, and this helps ensure we can clearly hear our presenter. You'll also notice that you have a control panel at the right-hand side of your screen. If you have a question for Tina during the webinar, go ahead and type it in the box, and I will read and answer them, and have Tina answer them during the 10-minute Q&A session at the end of the webinar. If you have further questions that may require a bit more of an in-depth answer, please feel free to follow up with me directly, Renee Long, ReneeLong, at achs.edu. And I'm happy to forward your questions along to Tina and just give us a little bit of time to get back to you. And now I'll go ahead and turn the webinar over to Tina, who's going to introduce herself and tell you her incredible story. So welcome, Tina. We're so glad to have you today.
Hey, everybody. I'm glad you joined us today. I decided to do this webinar in conjunction with ACHS to give people an idea of how my life as a homesteader pertains to my education here at ACHS, why my family and I ended up doing what we did. And I don't know how many of you have seen the show or have even heard about the show, but I'm going to give you my background here, and then if you have questions, like Renee said, you could submit them, and I'll try to get back to you. As she said, my name is Tina Elliott. I'm a wife, a mom, and a student of holistic health here at ACHS. I'm such a believer in using nature to protect and heal the body and mind that I packed up my family and moved halfway across the country from the Kansas prairie to the Oregon Valley. Our move not only helped put us in a climate that made growing our own food and medicine easier, it also put us within a local culture that believed in the power of plants. I have a systemic illness that's caused a lot of different medical problems that are kind of unusual. At the age of 35, I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, and then at 36, I was diagnosed with body-wide degenerative arthritis, ovarian failure at 37, and those are just a few. I've had problems pretty much head to toe, inside and out. I also have a blood clotting disease called von Willebrand's disease, and so all of these things together mean that I have to be very careful what I do, when and how I do it, and for how long. After many years, several surgeries, hundreds of tests, and thousands of dollars, my family and I decided that Western medicine was failing to give us answers, and it was also failing to make me feel any better. And in fact, I was on so many different medications and some of the side effects were actually making me feel worse. So we kind of decided to take back control of my health and the health of my family, and to that end, I began studying herbal medicine. When I started that kind of study, it was kind of a snowball effect. You start studying herbal medicine, and then you ultimately end up with looking at food and using food as medicine. And when you get down to the root of that, it's not just a change in lifestyle of pulling back from Western medicine more to an herbal lifestyle, but it's also really simplistic in how you eat. And since I have a family and I'm a mom, that also meant changing the way my entire family was living and eating so we could all be as healthy as possible to maximize the effect, not just for me, but for my kids too. And in order to, when you look at food and the nutritional value of it, you can go and buy organic food at the grocery store, but really the best way to understand, the best way to get the maximum impact on the food that you're eating is to grow it yourself. So, I think my family and I, we sometimes are a little bit extreme in our views, and we decided at that point to leave the city and buy a place in the country. Even though we had no experience farming at all, we we left our house with all of our stuff and bought 18 acres kind of out in the middle of nowhere in Kansas and started pursuing that kind of a lifestyle. I think Blake and I, my husband Blake and I, we kind of, our goal has always been to keep our family safe, fed, and warm. And to that end, living in the country, it allowed us to keep our girls safe because no matter what, we were in a place where we had the wood stove to keep them warm. If the power went out, it didn't matter. We had the capability of growing our own food. We ended up getting a whole flock of chickens and ducks for the eggs. We had dairy sheep that we also used for the wool, and we had dairy goats also. And just so you know, we didn't actually end up eating any of the animals that we had. So that was another reason we wanted to end up in Oregon, was because we eat a lot of seafood. We don't butcher our animals. But to that end, we wanted our girls to grow up knowing how to survive. Even if they ended up growing up and not wanting to have anything to do with farming and ended up in the middle of the city, we wanted them to know how to grow their own food, how to treat an infection, how to sew, how to build a fire, things like that skills that will serve them well for the rest of their lives, no matter what they decide to do after they grow up. And kind of a strange thing that happened after we moved to the country was people would come and visit, and they would say things like they really loved what we were doing and they wished that they could do the same thing. And my answer was always the same: if we can do it, anyone can, because we didn't have a history. We didn't know what we were doing any more than anybody else did. And I heard it so often that I decided to start a blog to encourage other people and to give them kind of a window into our life and how we lived every day and how we were trying to relearn how to live. We had no experience in farming. We weren't wealthy, and my health was marginal, which made it difficult, but we wanted to try. The worst that could happen was that we would end up failing and end up back in the city. Fear of failure keeps so many people stuck in lives that they don't like, but without failure, we can't learn, and we failed a lot. That's the number one reason people who attempt this kind of change end up moving back to town. There's a pretty steep learning curve, and if you didn't grow up this way, it's easy to get discouraged and quit. After 4 years of trying to achieve self-sustainability in Kansas, we decided to find a climate that was less harsh. My health makes temperature extremes tough to endure, and it seemed to be a huge struggle to keep plants and animals alive in the blistering heat of summer and the below freezing temperatures of winter. Every summer in Kansas, it got so hot that it was difficult for me to work outside, and we lost plants and animals to the heat. The same held true during the winter. Too cold for me to work outside, and the frigid temperatures would inevitably claim some of our trees and perennials, as well as some of the smaller animals like baby rabbits or baby birds. We decided to move to a place that would make growing our own food and being comfortable while we did it more of a reality. The comfort of our animals is a really big deal for us, and trying to keep them cool enough or warm enough just wasn't possible where we were. So we looked at the USDA growing zones, compared all the variables, and chose the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Blake and I had never even been to the Pacific Northwest, so of course it seemed the logical choice to pack up and move there. Might be becoming a little bit obvious that we're always up for an adventure. It was around this time that the producers of a show for TLC started putting out casting calls on homesteading websites like mine. When they heard our story, they wanted us to be part of their show, and our immediate reaction was no. Ironically, we are very private people, and who in their right mind wants to be on camera? However, we felt strongly enough about the lifestyle that we were living, as well as holistic medicine and the safety that comes with being able to provide for our family no matter what life throws at us, that we decided in the long run to be part of the show. We really wanted to encourage other people to become less dependent on the system. The healthcare system, the food production system, the power grid system. We wanted to wake people up and help them think about their life and their health. We wanted to show anyone they can take back the power over their lives and be more secure. And what would you do, for example, if the power went out and it was freezing, or if you lost your job and couldn't buy groceries? What would you do if you couldn't afford your medications or your electric bill? We also wanted people to learn about the power that food has, not only keep you healthy, but to reverse existing health problems. Consider how dependent the average American is. Doctors, pills, grocery stores, utilities companies, you name it. Every aspect of the American life relies on someone else's performance. We no longer know how to take care of ourselves. All of these solutions used to be common knowledge, but the more our society advances, the more sick and more vulnerable we become. If I was able to have a conversation with my grandfather, who was born in the 1800s during a time when Americans knew how to survive, and told him that my family was relearning how to use tinctures and poultices, how to raise chickens, how to preserve apples and other kinds of foods, I'm not sure he would understand that there were people who don't know how to do those things. One of the many reasons we chose Oregon was because that's where ACHS is. I wanted to be closer to the college in case I ever decided to get more hands-on with my classes. I enrolled at ACHS to get my degree in herbal medicine so that I could not only obtain a formal education, but also give me the credentials to teach. My education with ACHS has honed my knowledge of herbs and holistic medicine and has given me the confidence to help others. When I studied on my own, I only did it to change my life and that of my family. Because of ACHS and learning the history and science behind herbal medicine, I know that what I'm studying is truly beneficial for healing others too. Holistic medicine isn't just a fad, and it isn't just something that simply is the realm of hippies and quacks. It is real, and it works, and it can help everyone. Now that the show is over and we've had a chance to explore our new state, my family and I are getting back to the reason we moved here to begin with. Building gardens, planting food, buying our dairy animals and our poultry, and of course continue our education in healthy living. Since the show didn't really achieve the purpose of helping to educate people on how to take steps of building a homestead or growing food or how to improve their health using nature, we've even thought about starting a YouTube channel to do just that. So many people have contacted us wanting to know where to start. People want answers to all sorts of homesteading questions, like how to start seeds, how to milk a goat, how to dehydrate herbs for teas, and which plants to use. People want to learn these old skills. I'm not sure we're ready yet to open up our lives again for public display. I'm not sure we ever will be. I just feel that it's such valuable information, we may choose to put ourselves out there again anyway. The show failed to teach and instead focused on silly drama. I guess that's what most reality shows do, and we were naive to believe that it could be anything else. But I think if the producers had used their worldwide platform to educate, the show would have been more successful. What I heard from most fans of the show was that they had initially turned in to learn how to do things. Our show had the biggest audience of any TLC show that had premiered that year. But when it was obvious that the footage being shown wasn't going to focus on the how-to-do aspect of what we were doing, people stopped watching. The crew filmed us building fences, coops, gardens, and visiting with local food growers. They filmed us singing, being goofy, having fun, and meeting everyday folks. We shopped at local feed and seeds, at local farmers markets. We planted herbs and vegetables. We went wildcrafting and dried herbs for teas. We consulted with solar power experts. We even harvested honey from wild hives that were on our own land, and they didn't show any of that. We found the show was really rather disappointing. Blake, myself, and our children are not experts in this way of life. We're just regular people who are trying to change our lives and our health. People get intimidated or discouraged by experts who grew up living this way, people who've written multiple books or who have 40 years experience. Learning along with us, being able to share our successes and learn through our many failures, I think that makes people less afraid to take this leap. I want people to realize that there is no dream that is unattainable. I don't know how many times I've heard people say that they're too old or too poor, too sick or too busy to pursue how they really want to live. It just isn't true. You get to define your own reality. All it takes is the ability to adapt, the willingness to try despite any obstacles, no matter what your dream is. You might be surprised at what you can accomplish once you realize that the only obstacle you really have to overcome is fear. Fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of taking a chance. But if the only risk is end up right back where you are, what do you have to lose? I think there are some questions that we're going to answer for some people, and if you have any other questions, submit those, and we'll get those answered also.
Great. Thank you so much, Tina. It really is an incredible story and really inspiring to see how you were able to, not just for yourself, but for your family, make such a big, life-changing transition. So definitely kudos to you for doing that. It takes some major bravery. And we do have some questions that we've prepared that we believe that some of our listeners would be interested in hearing, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to questions from the audience. So the first question we have is, what benefits have you found from natural medicine and homesteading?
Well, I think it's kind of a combination.
Mm.
The natural medicine, of course, being able to get rid of all of my synthetic medicines and only use natural medicine. I mean, the biggest impact is the lack of side effects, because especially when you have something that's systemic. When you're
Mm-hmm.
taking multiple synthetic medications, you really don't know if it's, when something additional happens, if it's a manifestation of what's going on with your body and with your disease, or if it's a manifestation of the side effect of the medication, or if it's a combination of medications that are interacting with each other. So
Absolutely.
being able to be off of all of those, I think, makes me feel better for so many reasons. But with the combination of homesteading, I think it just gives me the peace of mind knowing that, for example, with my bleeding disorder, one of the first plants we always identify, and one of the first plants I always teach my kids is yarrow, to be able to identify it and know what it is, know what it does, because of the bleeding issue. And when I go out in my gardens and I'm able to get that from my land, I don't have to worry that there's been any kind of contamination from
Right.
overspray or any kind of contamination at all. I know exactly where everything is coming from.
Hmm. Yeah, so they really do kind of work in tandem, because you know where everything is coming from. I think, yeah, that makes a lot of
Well,
sense.
and I think that also, along with being outside and getting your hands dirty and
Yeah.
getting that vitamin D that so many people are short on, I think
Hmm.
I think the constant. Uh, I read some statistic not too long ago that something like 60% of the people in our country are on antidepressants.
Yeah. Sounds about
Crazy
right.
statistic like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with people are inside all the time. We
Yeah.
live this kind of cubicle life, and I think we're part of the earth. We need to be part of the food chain. We need to be getting our hands dirty. We need to be
Hmm.
connected to the planet and where our food comes from, and it's all just a big circle. And I think the lack of that is what is it's really damaging people.
Yeah. Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Definitely. Um, so to a little bit more on that, so you mentioned discussing tinctures with your grandfather. What specific natural remedies, you talked a little bit about yarrow, did you find success with specifically?
Oh gosh, there are so many with all the issues
Yeah.
that I have. One of the main things that I use is all the eggs from our birds.
Mm,
I dry their shells and make my own capsules to treat my bone problems, because
interesting.
they're so full of calcium and magnesium. And you know, anytime you're using plants or food, you don't have to worry about supplements. You don't have to worry about, okay, well, I'm taking the calcium, but I'm not taking the magnesium, and that's gonna unsettle the homeostasis in what you've got going on in your body. So when you
Mhm.
take something that is from nature, it's going to be balanced almost always. So with the eggshells, I'm getting a lot of things that would be difficult for me to get if I were doing it only with supplements.
Right.
So I use eggshells a lot. I use a lot of mint and lavender. I use turmeric, black pepper, cayenne, mullein, all those kinds of things for pain. I use a combination of dandelion, oat straw, motherwort, vitex, alfalfa, kelp, things like that for
Hmm.
replacement since my ovaries failed. Um, and I use a lot of base oils for my skin, because when you go through menopause in your 50s, there are some long-term effects that are going to happen to your skin and your hair and things like that. But when you go through menopause in your early 30s, that's a long time for your skin and your hair to be
Yeah.
without those kinds of hormones. And I think I went on synthetic hormone replacement therapy for probably 3 months before I realized that that was not going to work for me, because I also have a lot of allergies, of course. So it
Yeah.
didn't work. So I had to do herbal medicine in that regard too. So there are a lot of herbs that I use on a daily basis.
And that's wonderful, and that's wonderful you've been able to make that switch from the synthetic. It's wonderful. Um, and so I think you kind of covered this in our first question, but how do you feel homesteading relates to holistic health? Do you think there's a synergy between living off the grid and living and homesteading and holistic health?
Um, yeah, and I think what I already said kind of covers it
Hmm.
a little bit, but and I just one thing that I want to point out is that there's just nothing political about this. I think people have a tendency to get really political when it comes to the planet and herbal medicine, and like you have to buy into some sort of political ideology to believe one way or the other, and that's also not true. I want everybody to realize that it doesn't really matter what your political
Right.
beliefs are or what your religious beliefs are. None of that matters because we are part of biology, you know?
Hmm.
So if you consider everything coming from the earth, ashes to ashes, you know, I mean,
Hmm.
when you are getting your medicine directly from healthy dirt and you're part of producing that,
Yeah.
all of those things combine to make you as healthy as you possibly can be, but it takes work and it takes a desire to want to do it.
Hmm. Yeah, and a motivation too. It was certainly, I mean, you were certainly motivated by just probably being fed up and just wanting that change and wanting to go back to the earth for your health. So
I think what motivated me the most was how bad I felt.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
there were some of the medications that they had me on, and I'm not kidding. I lost a whole year of my life that I cannot remember because of the medications
Oh,
that they had me on.
that's awful.
I felt,
That's a
and my kids,
nightmare.
yeah, it
Hmm.
was a nightmare. And my kids, our whole lives revolved around my doctors and my appointments and my tests and the hospital and all this. And it just wasn't the way I wanted my kids to grow up. So
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
for them to be outside and involved with all the animals and the plants, and to watch my little kids. I mean, I think when we bought this thing, when we bought our farm in Kansas, my youngest was 6, I think, and now you know she'll go to where I keep all my herbs, and she'll
Hmm.
gather. You know, if her stomach's upset, she'll gather some lavender and some mint and sit there and make some tea, and it's just really cute.
Oh,
Just super cute.
yeah, that's wonderful. So speaking of herbs, you mentioned that one of the reasons you moved up here to Oregon was to be closer to ACHS. Has there been a specific class or a moment in your studies that you felt had a significant impact?
Um, well, you know, the herbal medicine classes I really, really like. I like those a
Hmm.
lot because that's kind of my area of
Yeah.
expertise. I've always been a gardener, always, always, always. But it wasn't until I got sick that I realized, oh, wait, you don't have to just plant pretty things. You can also plant useful things.
Right.
Um, but I think, you know, the anatomy classes have been really, really great because getting more in depth at the cellular level is pretty fascinating. And that goes along with the nutrition classes. The nutrition
Hmm.
classes and putting those together with the biology of it all is super interesting. And the pathophysiology, I think, is really interesting as well. If it, you know, it's just not. I don't think it's something that you can take lightly. It's a really big deal when you're talking to people about their health and their bodies and the possibility of using these kinds of things to make them feel better. It's not just, oh, drink some tea. You know, I mean, there are specific processes that go on within your body. So learning, I think the anatomy and nutrition probably have been the most helpful.
That's great to hear. And so our next question is, homesteading is certainly challenging enough on its own, but I'm sure when you add a film crew, that probably made things even more interesting. What challenges did you come across while filming, and how did you guys overcome
You know, I
those
don't think we
challenges?
really did overcome that. It was so chaotic.
Yeah.
Nothing, really nothing went as planned. And trying to get anything done for your real life while they are there saying, you know, could you say that again? Could you back up? Could you do this again? Could you look over here when you say that and try to make it sound real, because
Yeah.
it's not reality TV. It's just kind of not really much different than any other television show,
Hmm.
I don't think. I mean,
Hmm.
there are certain things that they want to have happen, and I think that they were kind of annoyed with us because we didn't fight or have any kind of drama, and I think what ended up
Which is a
happening is
good thing.
they mostly had footage of us doing things, building fences and
Yeah.
the hives and all of that. So a lot of it didn't even make it onto the show because we didn't do it for the drama aspect. We wanted to do it
Right.
for the education, but that didn't make it on the show.
Mm. Interesting. Very interesting to kind of get a behind the scenes look there.
Yeah.
Um, but now that you've been in the public eye, have you noticed that more people are reaching out to you for help? What's the most common piece of advice you seem to be offering people?
Yeah, I had a blog and a Facebook page for our farm in Kansas, and I haven't really written anything on it much since we were doing the show. I wasn't really allowed to talk about what was going on, and I had thought about getting those going again because the main thing that people ask me is, how did you do it? How did you get off all these medications? And I think that the biggest
Right.
question people had was, yeah, as it pertains to that, was, what do you do for pain? Everybody is interested in how do you deal with pain? And I think my answer to that is a couple of things. One is you kind of suck it up and deal with it a little more because I think the knee-jerk reaction for Americans is, oh my God, something hurts. I need to take something for it. And
Right.
a lot, I think most, well, gosh, I would venture to say all of the medications they would give a person for any kind of pain has some sort of negative side effect.
Sure.
So what I really do is I take what I take just to get the edge off of it, and then I deal with it a lot. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, you do yoga and stay limbered up, and when you're swollen, you're swollen. When things hurt, they hurt, and you take the edge off,
Yeah.
and that's all you can do. But people, I think that's pain is really the biggest thing for people.
Yeah.
It's sad.
That makes that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so on a lighter note, can you tell us about your favorite funny story or moment that was caught on film?
Well, if you've ever seen any of those blooper shows,
Hmm.
I think the biggest things that happen for people when they're on camera, it's really no different for us. Um, Falling down,
Yeah.
hitting your head on the side of something and just knocking you down, or you're walking with somebody having a conversation, you turn to look at them and they're gone because they fell, or just they're wanting you to be serious and have some moment about something and you just can't do it. You just get the giggles and it just doesn't work. And really, I think as we were filming it, I we made the comment several times that having the blooper reel would be way better than having the show because I mean it was
Sure.
just goofy silliness all the time when the cameras and gosh they filmed us doing uh, all sorts of stuff, but it didn't, none of that lighthearted goofiness made it on the show, which is kind of
Mm-hmm.
bad.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so now, Tina, are you still there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I lost you there. Okay. So we'll go ahead and take questions from our audience now, and I will go ahead and read the first question that came in from a Blake.
Oh Lord.
And Blake says, I am a huge fan of yours, but at the same time, a bigger fan of your husband. What's it like being married to someone so awesome?
Nice. He said he wasn't going to watch. That's Blake, my husband.
Wonderful.
You know what's terrible
Uh,
about that is Blake is so god dang funny. He is so funny, and they didn't show any of. I mean,
aw.
it's just too bad. It really is because he's a hilarious guy.
Yes, I'm sure we're learning that right now.
I think
So
all they really
welcome,
showed
Blake.
of us was just being stressed out.
Yeah, oh, yeah, they love the drama.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so then we have a question from Lisa, and she would like to know what was the greatest challenge in leaving your comforts?
You know, I think the biggest difficulty was stuff, the accumulation of stuff.
Yeah,
We had so much crap on that 17 acres. We had a shop, a barn, a two-bedroom apartment, and a house, and it was all full of stuff. And I thought we had done a pretty good job of getting rid of things. We had a sale, an estate sale that they filmed, and we actually had the estate sale at their direction, and they didn't put that on the show. And I mean, there was just so much stuff. We ended up leaving probably half of our belongings there just for people to go through, and we donated the rest of it. And then moving the rest of it here to Oregon, it took, I think we had 4 or 5 vehicles plus the moving truck that we had full of
Wow.
dogs and rabbits and people and birds and all of that. And we ended up still with way too much stuff. So I think the accumulation of stuff was the biggest challenge. And we're still fighting it. I'm still visiting the Goodwills of the world, getting rid of all of my things.
Yeah, definitely. That is a big challenge. So you kind of touched on this earlier, but maybe you could tell us again. Danielle says, "Hi Tina, what would you consider to be the top 5 most useful herbs to grow?"
For us, it would certainly be mint, any kind of the mints, the spearmint, peppermint. They're so easy to grow, and I really like you. People always say to only grow them in a pot. I liked putting them in my garden because they would come up. They're one of the first plants to come up in the garden, and so I would let them come up, and they would kind of serve the purpose of mulch. They absolutely won't let anything else grow, and then when it's about a foot tall, you harvest it all, and your other plants come up. So
Right.
we use a lot of mint. Turmeric is a really big deal. Turmeric and ginger both, and those are super easy to grow. Lavender, use a lot of lavender. Oh gosh, what else? What else do I use? Almost, I mean, gosh, if you can name it, I tried to grow it. And being here, I specifically put my finger on the map here because where I was in Kansas, we were in Zone 6. So a lot of the things that I wanted to grow, I couldn't grow there. This is really my first growing season here in Zone 8B. So I have a whole new world of plants open to me now that I haven't grown yet. So I'm sure I'll have more to add to that list.
Yeah, we really do have a wonderful climate for gardening up here. It's kind of phenomenal. It's been
we've
lovely.
never even been here. I just picked it based on the growing zone. This is the best place you can grow unless you want to be in Southern California or Southern Florida. And I don't
Right. Yeah. I actually moved here from Southern Florida, so I know the change. Yeah. So our next question comes from Rebecca, and she would like to know, what are your biggest income streams as an off-grid homesteader? I'm a budding homesteader, and I'm looking for simple ways to make money from a rural homestead, combining health and wellness, spirituality, and stewarding the land. Yet, farming veggies or herbs for profit seems way too difficult. What ideas do you have that don't rely on vehicles to transport products or electricity from the grid to power the internet for a blog, etc.?
Okay.
Thank you.
I wish I knew where she was located. Does it say where she lives?
No, but we can ask her, Rebecca, if you're there and you want to let us know where you're homesteading. St. Louis, Missouri, she says.
Missouri. We love Missouri. We actually used to spend a whole lot of time in Big Cedar in the Ozarks. One of the things that I would say, and I think this is an area, especially in the Midwest, that is not covered, and really somebody could make a killing, and Blake and I talked about doing this. If you have hoop houses and you're growing things like spinach and root vegetables all through the fall and the winter and the spring, really, because it's such a short growing zone there in the Midwest. One of the things that we struggled with was growing through those periods when it was getting colder or being terribly cold. If someone somewhere would start up several hoop houses and grow food like that, I think you'd make a killing. And the other thing is that people don't do for homesteading, you can have classes there. Whatever your interest is, it does, whether it's showing people how to raise meat birds and butcher them and preserve them, or growing herbs and showing people how to dry them and make teas, or showing people how to start seedlings, showing people how to raise goats and how to breed them and how to use them for dairy purposes, how to preserve that, how to make cheese. You can do all sorts of classes that people will pay you for, and they will come to your land to learn how to do that. You don't ever have to leave.
That's a great idea. Yeah, and even I think a lot of people up here in Oregon also host, like, well, hay rides would constitute a vehicle, but even just, pumpkin picking and things like that
Yeah, a
as
lot of people
well,
did that where I was
fall
from
festivals.
too. I was always kind of drawn though to not just to the city people who thought it was a kick to go out to the country and
Hmm.
drive around with the hay
Right.
bales, but I was always kind of drawn to the people who wanted to learn something because people
Yeah,
really,
absolutely.
really seem to be interested in learning old skills, and everybody's
Hmm.
interest is different, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are some great ideas. Um, so Virginia would like to know, can you recommend reading on the most important foods to grow for survival and how to maintain the food? So if there's any books that you've read that have helped you guys out there on the farm.
Um, you know, the I realized that I say a lot. I didn't realize that I say some do until
Yeah,
I did.
you'll notice your little ticks on these webinars. I've noticed my own for sure.
Uh, James Duke, Dr. James Duke, he is my Bible when it comes to foods,
Mm.
what foods to grow, and what to use them for. He's just a really interesting guy. He lives on the East Coast, and so he's familiar with how to grow through colder weather. He has really great books. And then for preservation, I have so many on preservation, and it kind of depends on how you want to go about it. If you're talking about meat, then the preservation would be different than herbs. Drying herbs and doing that outside in a solar dehydrator versus doing it inside in an Excalibur dehydrator. I mean, I think it would have to be more specific to know what kind of books to direct you toward as far as saving the food.
Right, absolutely.
Freezing
Yeah.
is really best if
Yes,
you
I'm
have to.
sure that, yeah.
It
Mhm.
keeps the nutrients intact versus cooking and canning and dehydrating, but people like to can because it takes up less space and no power.
Right, right, less energy for sure.
I dehydrate
Okay.
most of my stuff.
Um, so our next question is also from Rebecca, and she would like to know, do you source all of your herbs from your land via cultivation and wildcrafting, or do you purchase your herbs from outside sources? I think you kind of answered this, but maybe if you have any more insight.
Um, I try to grow everything I need, but in this line of study, there's always something coming up you've never heard of. And so when that happens, I try to find either a local producer who's growing it and buy it that way, or um, you can, of course, buy it from ACHS. They have the apothecary shop, and then
Mhm.
Mountain Rose Herbs is here in Eugene, or well, down where I live in Eugene. So if there's anything I can't find there, they're local to me.
Right.
I can just run over there and grab stuff, which is pretty cool.
Mhm. Um,
But
okay,
I
so
think
our next question.
my
Oh,
answer
mhm.
is if you're not going to grow it yourself, try to find a local producer because you almost always can.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's good advice. Um, next question comes from Morgan. She would like to know, how difficult is it to start up moving into a natural herbal using lifestyle?
I think if you were trying to do it overnight, it would be overwhelming. But with everything that we've done, it's kind of been a progression. So we add a little bit more every year. I,
Hmm.
it's a lifelong, life-changing kind of
Sure.
process. So yeah, I don't think you can look at it as I'm living in the middle of the city now. How would I go about homesteading or growing herbs or something like that? It's kind of a progression. I think the very first plant I ever got that was kind of considered medicinal herbal, the reason I got a black pepper plant and I grew it in the house. And up until probably 10 years ago, everything I grew, I lived in the city and I grew pretty things. I didn't grow any herbal things. I think the first thing I did after that black pepper thing was I pulled out the garden that was closest to my front door, it was all aesthetic, just the really pretty plants that kind of served no purpose. I pulled that all out and planted herbs, and I think I planted a blueberry bush and a couple of raspberry canes and some
Oh, wow, that's wonderful.
mint and lavender, and because you have these a lot of people have landscaping around their properties or around their house or even plants in their apartments. And you can grow, even if you live in an apartment, you can grow food. It takes 30 days to grow radishes and lettuce. You can do that in your apartment. You can do that on your kitchen counter. You can grow tomatoes and sage and basil on your patio in pots. I think that's so that's what I would say. Pull out anything that doesn't serve a purpose and plant food.
Yeah, I think that's a great, yeah, and lavender is one that just can be used as landscaping, and rosemary, and they're super useful.
Yeah. And like I said, I would plant mint everywhere. I plant mint everywhere. Of course, here, now I probably won't because it's considered invasive here, but where I was from, it wasn't, and it served a really great purpose as mulch and keeping weeds down, and then I was able to harvest it.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have another question from Blake, and he would like to know if you could choose one animal, one herb, and one vegetable to start your homestead with, what would they be?
Animal, I would choose ducks.
I love ducks too.
I love ducks too, and I like ducks way better than chickens. I wrote an article about it for Mother Earth News about why I prefer ducks to chickens. Chickens are pretty brutal. Ducks are. And interestingly enough, also people who are allergic to eggs can often eat duck eggs. It's a protein in the chicken eggs that they're allergic to. Herb, turmeric.
It's a good one.
And what was the other question? Food.
One vegetable. Yeah, one vegetable.
Vegetable. Beans.
It's another good one.
Yeah, because you boil it down to the most basic. If you're eating rice and beans, you can survive. So that would be it.
Absolutely. Okay, our next question is from Morgan, and she would like to know, would converting my lifestyle and consumptions over to all natural, would it eventually benefit my case of 2 herniated lower discs in my back?
I don't know. It depends on what caused it, and it depends on what treatment you're doing now. I am a believer that if your body can heal it, it will heal it if you give it the tools to do so. And in order for that to happen, you have to be as healthy as you possibly can be. And in order for that to happen, you need to be eating the highest quality food that you possibly can. And it's expensive to go and buy all that stuff, and seeds are cheap. So I think along with growing your own food, you're going to make sure that you're eating the best possible kinds of food, and you're also going to be out there pushing yourself physically to get a little bit more exercise, and that's always a good thing too. But if you have spinal problems and you're going to be gardening, you're not going to build up higher gardens. I mean, one of the things that is hard for me is I can't garden at the ground level anymore. I have to build up gardens so that they're a little bit higher, and I think for anybody who has spinal problems, that would probably be a wise thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice. And Anne would like to know, how many acres do you run?
We had 18 in Kansas, and when we moved here to Oregon, we sat down on about 80.
There you go. And you would also like to know, have you tried distilling essential oils?
I haven't, and I'm not sure if I want to. I mean, there are so many avenues to learn, and so many different things you can do. I mean, one of the things we really want to start doing is making soap. We had some friends that ended up with actually the goats that you see right there, those little white Nigerians. Those are dairy goats, and some friends of ours ended up with those goats, and they made us some soap from her milk before we left. It's really great soap, and that's one thing we haven't done yet is made soap. So I really want to do that, and that of course requires essential oils. But gosh, I don't think you can do it all. Give me that lady's name, and when she starts making essential oils, I'll buy them from her.
There you go. Okay, and Lori would like to know, how can I get my husband more interested in homesteading? My husband's not as interested as I am.
Start showing him the ingredients in the food that he's eating. And after a
Mm.
while, he'll get annoyed, and then he'll say, okay, show me. And I think one of the biggest things is just doing. And people learn through example, whether it's kids, your husband, your wife, your teacher, your student, it doesn't really matter, your siblings, people learn through example. And so if she's out there and she's gardening and she's growing and kind of not bragging about it, not saying, look what I did, doesn't this taste great? I think people kind of warm to the idea when they see other people doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like a slow adaptation.
Uh-huh.
It feels good. It feels good to be eating
Yeah,
good things and working for it and
it
seeing where
does.
it's
But
coming
if you beat them
from.
over the head with it, then they'll just resist.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just seeing if there's any other questions. It doesn't look like there's any other questions coming in, but I'll give you guys out there one last chance to ask Tina any questions before we move on. Okay, it doesn't look like there's anything coming in. Um, but Morgan does say, wonderful, wonderful responses. Thank you so much, Tina. So I guess that's all the questions we have, and thank you everyone for these great questions. And please feel free to send any follow-up questions to me directly at Renee, R-E-N-E-E, Long, L-O-N-G, at achs.edu, and I'm happy to forward those questions to Tina. And thank you everyone for attending this special discussion webinar. Also keep an eye out for an email which will go out soon with a free recording of today's webinar. And make sure you stay subscribed to our ACHS webinar email list to receive future announcements and invites for ACHS webinars. Also, if you enjoyed today's webinar, you can absolutely check out ACHS's accredited online herbal medicine programs like Tina's on our website at www.achs.edu/academic/herbal medicine education online degrees, diplomas, certificates. And you can find that on our academics tab at achs.edu. So thanks everyone and have a wonderful day. And thank you so much, Tina, for sharing your wonderful story. We truly appreciate it.
You are welcome. It was fun. Thanks.
Have a great day.